It's 2:30 a.m., and Gail Bergstrand awakens to a series of thumps coming from the other side of her bedroom wall.
I told my husband, I said, I'm going to call the police. And he said, well, what are you going to tell them, that you heard thumping in our neighbor's duplex? And I said, oh, you're right. You know, I can't do that. But I said, I'm going to put my ear on the wall, and if I hear one more thing, I'm calling.
Bergstrand, however, hears nothing more. All's quiet until 3:30, when there's a knock on her door. It's her next-door neighbor, Melinda Harmon.
She said, I think Dave is dead. I think Dave could be dead, and she didn't know that definitively.
That information basically was there'd been an attack in the residence, and her husband had been severely injured. So in that type of scenario, you go code 3, lights and sirens, to the residence to get there as quickly and safely as you can. I went into the bedroom, the master bedroom, and that's when I first saw David on the bed.
David Harmon is dead, his face beaten with a blunt object.
I don't think David's mother would have recognized him as he lay there on the bed.
You could not tell if he was 8 or 80. You could not tell if he was a man or a woman.
Officer Lerick has a talk with Melinda Harmon.
When I asked her what happened, she said that she was awakened by the sounds of thuds as she lay in bed next to David. She was then grabbed by the arm and pulled out of the bed and told to show them, the intruders, where the keys to the bank were.
The bank is the Patron State Bank. David Harmon is a teller there.
She said she went downstairs, showed them where the keys to the bank were, and then she was struck.
The intruder's blow, Melinda says, knocked her cold.
Sometime later, she woke up and she ran next door and pounded on the door of the Bergstroms to ask for help.
She was upset, but not overly upset. She never asked what was her husband's condition. She never said, are you really sure he's dead?
Detective Joe Pruitt takes a statement from Olathe's newest widow, Melinda Harmon.
She said that she was picked from the bed by her hair and led downstairs, and the two suspects, who said they were probably black males, she could tell that from their voice, demanded the keys to the bank where David was employed. This bruise on her left cheek was about the size of a dime. If she'd been knocked unconscious, she would still have been woozy, she would have been disorientated. She was able to answer our questions. She was not overly upset.
Mrs. Harmon's story is not hanging together the way it should. The more Pruitt looks at it, the less he likes it.
The real thing that stuck in our mind was, what would anybody accomplish by taking the keys and breaking into the bank in the middle of the night, knowing full well that there's a time lock on the vault? I mean, you get, what, office chairs, a check protector, that's about it.
For the first few hours, everybody subscribed to this home invasion story, and we spent considerable time chasing those leads down. Surveillance was set up at the bank, waiting for these bad guys to show up. As the hours went by, though, nobody showed up at the bank. We began to sort of assess her statement and how impractical and improbable we felt that statement was. So as the morning went into the afternoon, I think everybody felt this story stinks.
Detectives begin to take a hard look at Melinda Harmon, as well as a college student and family friend named Mark Mangelsdorf.
Mr. Mangelsdorf, the friend of the family, his appearance there was somewhat unusual.
Be safe, stay busy, call me if you need anything.
Police at the Harmon crime scene found Mr. Mangelsdorf there, just hanging around.
Officer Lerick pointed out that even though it was around 5 o'clock in the morning, Mr. Mangelsdorf's hair was wet, and I don't mean moist like you'd run a comb through it, a wet comb, but it was wet like he had taken a shower. What we found out was that there was a very close relationship between Mrs. Harmon and Mark. In fact, Mr. Bergstrand, the next-door neighbor, later testified that he had seen them in a neighborhood pool, standing nose to nose in the pool in a very intimate embrace.
Detective Pruitt has the makings of a motive, but nothing more in the way of hard evidence against Melinda Harmon.
Her family sort of descended around her, circled the wagons around her right after this crime happened. Her dad became, within a fairly short period of time, really pretty uncooperative with the police. You're picking on my daughter, and how dare you ask her, and very controlling. She was then taken away back to Ohio within about 2 days of the homicide happening, never to return to that house.
Well, the bottom line is that we think they're involved, and we thought from the very beginning that there was enough information to arrest both of them for David's murder. But we never thought for 1 minute there was enough information to convict him, so we did not make an arrest.
The case goes cold and stays that way for almost 20 years.
And you remember the truth, but a lie, unless you continue to tell it, you tend to forget.
Melinda Harmon is now Melinda Rash, Olathe, Kansas. And the murder of her first husband far behind her.
You expected to see somebody that maybe was in mourning for 20 years and maybe never got remarried again. But obviously she was able to go on with her life and go on with her life very well.
At 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, cold case detectives ring her doorbell.
Well, her story now is that she was awakened by these terrible thuds of someone striking her husband.
She got up on her own and went to the bathroom. There was a masked, shadowy figure beating her husband.
In 1982, Melinda told police 2 men broke into her house. Now there is only one.
Well, right away we realized, hey, what about the 2 black guys that broke in demanding the bank keys? What about one guy saying to the other, I think you hit him too hard, you may have killed him? There wasn't any of that. So Steve and I both remember looking at each other across the table going, wow, we're on to something here.
The story you later said, 2 black men,
yes,
bank keys.
Well, 2 dark figures.
2 dark figures,
yes,
bank keys.
Yes.
Why did you tell the cops that story?
At the time, I didn't feel it was a story.
Inside a police interrogation room, Detective Bill Wall goes to work on Melinda Rash.
So I'm trying to get her to say that, yeah, I lied back in 1982.
You knew it wasn't true, right? This is where this secret is. This is where I think we need to go.
Big thing, she's changed her story. She's lied, and she's admitted that she lied back in 1982. She's admitting that she lied, and that's huge.
I had a sense that something bad might happen.
After 45 minutes in the hot seat, Melinda starts pointing fingers, all of them at her now former friend, Mark Mangelsdorf.
In my heart, I know him.
Deep down, I still think there's more. It's just too weird the way you're saying it.
That's where I want to go then. I want to go deep down with you.
Here's my big hang-up.
Okay. Tell me your big hang-up.
That you didn't have knowledge of this prior to.
Prior knowledge. Wall is suggesting that Melinda and Mangelsdorf staged the break-in and planned the murder together.
And he didn't talk to me. He hit me.
Would he have talked to you about that prior to that?
No, I don't know.
You're crazy and smart enough to figure all this out on his own, that he's not going to tell you anything, so you have no guilt. And then just assume that you're going forward with this story. How did he know you were going to make up a story that wasn't true?
How did Mark Mangelsdorf know that you were going to come up with this story about two black guys breaking in the house demanding bank keys? That's way out there. Of course he knew that she was going to lie for him.
There was some talking about how we were going to get away with this.
Melinda never admits to a murder plot, but the cold case team believes she has done enough to bury herself. Unlike Melinda, who opened the door to police, Mark Mangelsdorf refuses to talk. Both are indicted for murder. Melinda is tried first, and Mangelsdorf plays the role of star witness.
Let me be very clear. I was not in love with Melinda Harmon. I did not have a romantic or sexual or physical relationship with her.
Paul Morrison is the prosecutor for Johnson County, Kansas.
2 people decided that they were going to murder this guy to get him out of the way so that they could be together.
In 1982, Mangelsdorf said he and Melinda did not stop by his apartment the day of the murder. In 2005, he backs away from that statement. On the witness stand, that proves to be a problem. Melinda Harmon does not testify at her trial. The jury, however, gets to watch a video of her interrogation.
The jury got to see her firsthand, how she reacted. And anybody with life experiences that watches this tape will see that this woman is up to this to her neck. She is guilty. She conspired with this Mark Mangelsdorf to kill her husband.
On count 1, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder. On count 2, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder.
For Prosecutor Morrison, Melinda Harmon's guilty verdict is only half the job. The trial of Mark Mangelsdorf awaits. Morrison meets with Melinda's attorneys, and they strike a deal. Melinda's conviction will be set aside. She can plead guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree murder, if she agrees to testify about Mangelsdorf.
At this time, Your Honor, the defendant, Mr. Mangelsdorf, wishes to withdraw his plea of not guilty and his election for trial, and we will be entering a plea to a substitute information.
Faced with the possibility of Melinda's testimony, Mark Mangelsdorf also pleads guilty to second-degree murder.
Yes, Your Honor, I understand.
Under 1982 laws, the judge sentences Mark Mangelsdorf to the maximum allowed by the law. Melinda, too, is sentenced to 10 to 20 years at a Kansas prison. As part of her deal, she fills detectives in on the details of a love triangle that turned into a murder.
I think we're ready, yes.
Christina, how are you feeling?
She and Mark Mangelsdorf went for a walk that afternoon. She said during that walk that Mark told her, "It's imminent. I bought a crowbar and it's imminent." That night it happened.
After Mangelsdorf killed her husband, according to Melinda, he turned on her in an effort to make the murder look like a break-in.
He then does hit her in the side of the face and says, "Sorry to do this to you, sweetie." I think that was a quote.
In an ironic twist, Melinda and Mark never saw each other again after the murder.
She said, you know, when I'm standing there watching Mark Mangelsdorf beat my husband to death, I knew at that time that I could never be with this man. I knew at that time that this was a big mistake. So they never hooked up afterwards.